But there's something I wanted to explain, which is worthwhile, because it really gives you, in many ways, an insight in how to learn. What is the real approach? Mishnayos, we know, is really a collection of halachas divided into paragraphs. Each paragraph is called a Mishnah. But basically, Mishnayos is what? It's a collection of halachas. Remember that? Now, I once asked, hope you people remember, what is a halacha? Remember, everything has to be clear. There's not such thing as, well, we can remain vague and still be happy. No. Everything that you know must be clear, must be defined, must have a certain, precision to it, or else you pay for it later on. So, if you recall, I asked, what's the definition of a halacha? Do you remember that? Remember what the definition of a halacha is? Okay. A halacha, it's remarkable, hardly anybody will be able to define it. It's remarkable. It's probably the most used word in Torah. What's the halacha? Yet it's the most difficult to define. It's amazing. Yeah. So the answer to that is, the definition of a halacha is the required behavior in a given situation. What makes it required? Well, then it depends on who the authority is. Right? It could be min Torah, biblical. It could be midrabanan, rabbinical. It could be minhag, which is the community, or it could be a chumrah, which is a private desire to, do a halacha. But those are the authorities of the halacha. But the definition of a halacha is the required behavior in a given situation. Why is that important? Because a definition ultimately tells you not only what something is, but then how to begin to divide it into its components. So, how many components are there in that definition? Feel free. How many different components are there to that definition? Two. There's the required behavior, and there is the given situation. There you are. I call my terminology, a given situation is a case, or a situation, or a circumstance. Correct? What's happening? I call it the case. The required behavior is called a din. I call it the conduct. So every halacha has a case and a conduct. What's happening, and what do we do? Remember that? Simple. We really break it down and look at it. Now, how many conducts are there really? Well, it seems like there are thousands. No. There's only 5.
Oh, I remember 4.
No, there are 5. Which can be divided into 10. There is chayav potter, osa mutter, kosher posel, tomei tahor, yotza lo yotza. There you are.
That's all.
That's it. Let's go find some what else, that's all there is. Each one of those is a conduct as regards a specific situation. Okay? Why is that important to know? Well, it's much clearer. That means every time we learn a halacha in a Mishnah or a Shulchan Aruch, doesn't make a difference, right? Every time we learn a halacha, we always have to look for these 2 components. Exactly what is the case and what is the conduct? What is the din about this case? You see, you need to have that knowledge precisely. A lot of people don't. To many people, the case is vague. They have a general idea, but you need to know exactly what the case is. So many times the Mishnah will say, like the Mishnah Beis, which we had, a person can't sit down to a barber, someone from Milncha, until he davens. And then it says you can't go to a merchatz, to a borsiki, and so on. It had a whole series of situations, all included under that first. You can't do it until you daven mincha. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? So all these situations, you can't take a haircut, you can't go to a tanning place, you can't go to a bathhouse. All those were situations that had the same conduct. Don't do it until you daven mincha. You see? But you have to enumerate that. It looks like it's just one thing. It's not. It's 5 different cases. You see? Good. Now, this is very important because it tells us in many ways something that you need to do. In fact, it defines the brisker derech. That's what it really does. When you look at a case, a situation, any given situation will have many different categories to it, conceptual distinctions, or havchonas. It will have that, each case. If you can look at a halacha, which is a case and a conduct, and then look at the case and say how many different types of categories or attributes or parts are there in this case, in many ways you will have been doing what the brisker derech does. Then, once you know the different, so therefore then what happens is, it's not just a situation. It is a situation that has many parts to it. You see. Okay? Mm-hmm. For instance, take any halacha. Okay?
How many hours from Mishnah?
Yeah.
That one shouldn't shouldn't do that, too.
Well, that you shouldn't go, you shouldn't go to the barber before you daven mincha. Okay, so we look at that. We say, okay, that halacha or that situation has many parts. One, who shouldn't go? Who? Jew, goy, woman, minor, Because when you talk about who is what? His nationality, his gender, his age, his mental status. Who shouldn't go? See, so who is a distinction, right? Mm-hmm. Barber, that's an activity. Is that the only activity he shouldn't do before mincha? No, there are many other activities. So the activity itself is another distinction, right? So we have who and what is the activity? Under what conditions? In other words, you shouldn't go to a barber under these conditions. But you can go to a barber under different conditions. So what conditions are there that this halacha is said about? And what conditions are there that this would be exempt? You see? That's another part. You see? Okay? And mincha, which mincha? We talk about mincha gdoila or mincha ktana.
Or any other mitzvah.
Or any other what? Exactly. Any other chiyuvim that are time related. Because mincha is time related.
Yeah.
Right? And then why? What's the rationale? You see, what have I done? I've taken a case and I've looked at many different parts to it. And what that does, it sets me up to understand many things which you will encounter. Many times you will have a machlokas, but it's not on the halacha, it's on one part of the halacha. For instance, which mincha is it? Mincha gdoila, mincha ktana? Well, clearly in this argument, so clearly the argument doesn't center around the halacha, it just centers around, which mincha are we talking about? You see? That's brisk. Which is simply the understanding that every case has havchonas. Every case has distinctions, parts to it, that we can unravel or split, you see. And then we could take a look at many things going on, arguments, that really can address only one part and not the halacha itself. You see. That's a very important idea. In many ways, it's a model that you have to think about. Whenever you learn halacha, you want to divide it into its parts. And then you could begin to look at what the Mishnah says. And then when you see many other meforshim, different meforshim will do what? They will address different parts. Like one of the parts of you can't sit in front of a barber, right, is who made the law? Who made it? Or what's the authority? Is it biblical? Is it midrabanan or is it a minute? What is it? You see all the different parts that come into play? Each one, you can have pirushim on each one of these things. I cannot overemphasize, I cannot overemphasize the importance of what I just said. True clarity comes, one, to define your term, even though it may be hard. Two, to take the definition and look for the parts, and take the halacha and divide it into its many parts. Got it? The third aspect is called the generalization. So we have the definition, we have the analysis of its parts, the components, we have its generalization. You see. You take that halacha. In many ways, generalization is critical, because that's the beginning of synthesis. Remember what I told you? There's analysis and there's synthesis. Analysis is to break down something into its parts. That's exactly what I did. But the beginning of the breakdown is called the definition. Now, what is it first? Once you've defined something, then we can break it down. That's the analysis. But you want to put it together with other things. What does it belong to? You see. So that's a synthesis. So generalization will do that. So if there's a halacha that you cannot go to a barber unless you daven mincha, right? What's the generalization of that? What's the formula? In other words, if I want to measure the area of this room, well, I get out my ruler, measure its length and its width. Yes? And I determine the area. Correct? But what do I want to do? I don't want to do this to every room in the world. I don't want to do this to every room in the world. But I don't want to do this to every room in the world. So what do? We create what's called a formula. A formula is a general statement about the relationship between the length and width of the room and how that determines the area. So therefore, all I have to write is L, length, times W, width, is equal to A, area. You see? And voila, I now can determine every area in the world without having to go there and measure it. You see? Interesting. That's a true generalization.
If it's circular or
Yeah, formulas for, you have it's mathematical formulas.
if it's circular, you need something else.
What's a different formula? Yeah, I'm talking about a rectangle or a square. Yeah. Remember the formula for the area of a circle?
Pi r squared.
Pi r squared. How about a cylinder?
Pi r cubed.
No, pi r squared times height. Because it's really a circle, it's just height. I didn't get into that. That was my old math days. Anyway, how we generalize, so there's a whole concept of generalization. Because you don't want to just learn a thing, you want to learn to what does it belong? Where does it fit? You see. Like if I asked you, get, what is a get? So what do we need to do first?
Define.
We need to define it. So what's the definition of a get?
Contract.
It's a document.
Document.
It's not a contract.
That dissolves a
Because
marriage.
the woman does not agree.
It's a document. A document that dissolves
You
a
know,
marriage.
right? Or
But
a
she
contract
doesn't
is an
agree.
agreement between two
If she
parties.
doesn't agree, it's not down, no? Doesn't she
No.
have to put her hands
No.
out and...
I mean, I tell you, you can divorce a woman on kocha. I mean, there's a zero not to, but no, right? So it's not a contract, it's a document.
Document.
Okay, go ahead. Or it's a written document. Fine.
Written document.
Not all written. Okay, go ahead. That
Dissolves a marriage.
dissolves a marriage,
Or separates a man and woman.
separates a man and woman. You can do that
Or
with a
husband and
wall.
wife.
Separates a man and woman, I don't like because that can be physical.
Okay.
This is a legal separation, which is not physical, conceptual. So a get is an instrument, a little more technical. It's a device, right? That severs the marriage bond. That's what it does. That's an exact definition.
So that's the definition.
Now,
No. Well, under which perspective make this difference? When you give a definition to someone, you could look at it from different perspectives, right? You could say it's a cloth with written ink on it.
No, you can't.
There's
No.
ways of
That's
describing something. What kind of definition you're looking for?
look. Definition has its rules, but the most important idea is what is the definition of a definition.
Right. That's what I was
Okay.
getting to.
The boy say, what is the definition of a definition? That's interesting, huh?
Defining the clarity.
No, you can't use the same word that you're trying to explain.
Definition.
If we don't know what a definition is, I can use the word as a sentence. What is the definition of a definition?
Explaining the purpose.
No. Purpose may or may not be related to a definition.
A translation?
No, it's certainly not a definition. I don't know what the thing is. You translate it from Russian to Greek, I still don't know what it is. A definition is a statement that describes the true nature of something or the essence of something. That's what a definition is. It has to say what the thing is. Everything has to be defined. And a definition is nothing more than a statement that describes the true nature of something. That's what it is, right? If it doesn't describe the true nature of something, then it's not a definition, you see.
But what is the nature?
Or it's an inadequate or insufficient definition.
Right. The nature means all aspects.
Nature means what is it? It's essential attributes. Everything has essential attributes, which means this is what makes it what it is. And if you remove them, or one of them, it ceases to be that. That's how you know it's a definition. Like if I say, like if I have a green car, so would I define car as anything which is green? No, because green is not an essential attribute, it's color. The car could be red, still be a car, you see. You know what I'm saying? So therefore, you have to know what it's called, its essential attributes, as opposed to its non-essential attributes.
So that should really be the first
So
word.
what?
Definition, meaning learning how to define something is key.
Is key, yeah. That's always key. And it's interesting, you know, we use so many words that we think we know and we really don't. You know?
I'll give you
I
the-
was once teaching a guy, I was a choshev guy, you know? And,
It's funny, right?
As usual,
What?
he-
he was a Rav. His brother was really he's a Rav and he's also a Dayan. You know. So I was trying to show him that a lot of stuff you know, you really don't know. We're going through different things, you know. Like I asked him, what's a chazaka? Give me a definition for it. You know? What's a migroi? Define it. You know, what's a shvuah, or, you know, what's hezek? What is damage really? All kinds of things, you know. What's a kinyan? What is it, you know? And it's amazing how difficult it was for him to correctly articulate what it was. Even though we both knew that he knows what it is.
So what does it mean he knows what it is if he
He
can't
knows
define
because
it?
he could recognize it when it's there. But he cannot say exactly what it is. And that limits severely his understanding. So, that's why, so we look at get, we say get is a device, and that's what it is. A device is that which can achieve something else. A tool, an instrument, a vehicle, a device. They all mean the same thing, right? So a get is a device. That already tells us that it's used for something to achieve something else, right? So a get is a device that does what? That severs, cuts, creases. What does it sever? A marriage bond, which is the bond or the relationship, a bond between a man and a woman, called ishus. You know, so we could say a get is a device that severs the ishus, that severs the ishus.
Right. It has to be a man and a woman, issues, right?
Well,
Eliezer?
you know, don't argue with the
Yeah.
don't argue with the congressman today what a matter all this, you know. They're gonna come up with a get that severs, you know.
No, cash, I mean, Evet, for Evet.
Who?
For Evet, don't forget.
Yeah, get shichur.
Or a Kenyan. That dissolves a Kenyan. Is that would that explain it gets?
Get doesn't dissolve a Kenyan.
So what
It
about
dissolves
Relationship.
what?
It dissolves legal relationship.
It dissolves a legal, well, it's a legal relationship, yeah. It's a legal state called
So
ishus.
the Isha Niknis, it
Who?
does have that Lashon of Isha Niknis.
Where?
His uniqueness.
That's
So does-
kedushin, not gittin, right?
No, but what he's trying to say is that he's trying to say it's not a relationship. It's more than a
You
relationship.
said it's not a kinyan.
A get is not a kinyan.
No, it's not a kinyan.
Yeah, it dissolves a state. What's a kinyan? How do you define kinyan? Think about it. I want to tell you something. You know the answer. That's the interesting part about this. There's nothing that I'm going to tell you that you don't know. The problem is not what you know. The problem is you don't think about it. You just somehow intuitively or unconsciously know. But it has to be brought to the conscious mind. You know. So what is a kinyan? A kinyan is a device that creates a legal state called bias. How's that sound?
Can you?
No.
Yeah.
A kinyan is a device, right, that allows an individual to acquire something, which means that he now legally is the owner. So a kinyan is a device, same thing as a get. A kinyan, however, is a device that allows an individual to enter into a legal relationship called bias with an object. A get is the reverse. A get reverses the state of bias, because ishus is really bias. So a kinyan creates bias. A get dissolves bias. You see?
Yeah.
Got that? Simple. You knew that before.
But a get is only with people.
I didn't tell you anything you didn't know, except you just have to think of it in a certain
Yeah, it's a
precise way.
relationship between people.
Well, bias is a relationship. Then I can ask you the definition of bias and so on. You can go on, but each
No,
thing
he's
you
saying
do,
it's only with people. It doesn't dissolve a bias relationship with objects.
no,
Meaning healthcare,
it's a,
right?
it's yeah. So therefore, now what do we do after we define something? What's the next step?
We see where it belongs.
Who?
Where it belongs.
No,
Components.
Or we break it.
You look at
components.
Yeah.
We need to break it into its parts, right? Remember I said?
Yeah.
So, get.
Owner. Oni.
Oni or no. No, so what are the components of a get?
The other device. It's the first
Well, one.
component.
So we have all kind. What is the device? You know.
It's a piece of paper. Cloth.
Well, in that itself, what is the device? You have what? It's a written. You write on it. So what is the written? What's the material you can write on? What's the language you write in? Who writes?
What do you do with it?
What was he? What does he say? And so on. You see, 4 parts just to the instrument, the physical instrument, which is called a get, already has parts. What's the writing material? Right? What's the ink? What's the language? What's the text? How is it written? When is it written? Can I write it on the horn of a calf? Where can I write it? And so on. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that itself is the components of what? Of the get itself. Then what is there? Let's break it down further. A get is really part of what?
Procedure.
It's part of the Gerushin process, isn't it? A get doesn't dissolve anything. It has to be given to the wife. That's a process. So therefore now let's look at the process. Who can issue a get? Right? When? Under what circumstances can a man divorce his wife? What type of a wife can he give it to? What happens if she's crazy?
Mm-hmm.
You see? What happens if she's not around? You know what I'm saying? Can you use a agent, which is a surrogate, substitute for you, or you have to hand it to her? Right? Do you have to give it to her? Or do you have to, how is she supposed to receive it? What's the method of reception? You see? All this stuff.
You email it.
Yeah. You can't email because it has to be a written document.
Oh, scan.
So email is not written. You're not writing the,
Not really anything.
you're not writing anything. It's, I mean, you're texting, but you're not writing anything.
You can email a scanned copy.
Yeah, but that wouldn't work.
It's an electronic document. Today there's electronic signature.
Yeah,
The concept.
yeah. Oh, look, it's got to do whatever they want. But anyway, the main idea is those are its parts. You see, all these parts of Gittin form the whole Masechta. You see, all the halachas in the Masechta Gittin is nothing more than the halachas or the required behavior of what? Of the different parts of the gerushin process, which is the process to dissolve the marriage bond. That was the whole Masechta I just gave you. You know, the whole Masechta is nothing more than the various halachas, conducts that go on what? On the different cases. And what were those cases? Those cases are nothing more than the parts of the gerushin process. That's all it is. It's the whole Masechta. Different prokum deal with different parts. And therefore they have different halachas. Got that? Isn't that interesting? So you can organize the entire Masechta based on this idea. Define it. Find its components. But we didn't generalize it, right? We therefore know what get is, and we found its parts. And we realized that all the halachas deal with just different parts, and so on. But how do you generalize get?
Instrument which reverse the
What?
relationship. Instrument that reverse the legal relationship. That's a generalization already.
Good. What is the legal relationship? What is the legal relationship?
A relationship that implies obligations.
No, I didn't go, no. What is the legal relationship between a man and a woman? What's it called?
Oh, it's
Issues.
It's called ishus.
Right.
Ishus is a form of, or a type of,
Opinion.
no.
Relationship.
No.
Legal relationship.
Kinyan is how do you acquire. We're talking about
Ownership.
ownership,
Balance, sorry.
Exactly. So,
That's,
what, you're not sure?
What's your
What are you
problem?
not sure?
my wife is not sure.
Your wife's not sure. That's why only you're invited to the shiur.
That's why you call it bow, not call it anything else.
No, I mean it's
So
probably
a
some
get,
aspect, but it's not. That's not what it is.
what?
Really.
Wait, let's go slow. Again, what is a get? A get is an instrument that severs the marriage bond.
Right.
But the marriage bond is really what? It's a legal state, right? But that legal state is one type of what? Bilus. Ishus is really bilus, except that the object that you own is called a woman, and therefore it's called marriage. You see, if you own a cow, it wouldn't be called marriage, it would be called ownership.
We can leave this on the table.
Yeah, that's, I'm not, You see the difference. But in the end, it's all ownership. So how do we generalize now? How do we generalize? So we have a device or an instrument that severs one type of virus. So we generalize and say, well, what are other types of instruments can dissolve what?
Ownership.
Ishus, or ownership.
Death.
Death is another, correct?
For issues, right?
You see? So we've now gone from one instrument called get to another instrument which is really a situation called death.
It's funny because death does not resolve any other kind of virus. Meaning if you own a table, death does not dissolve your values to that table. Meaning there's Yerusha, meaning goes that
Well-
it still belongs to your descendants.
I don't know. That's a good, see there you have to be choker. What happens? What transpires when a person dies vis-a-vis the legal state of bias?
Oh, Bibles continues and maybe Bibles is a severe, and then
So what you see with that? So the question there is, is there so the category that the component that would fit that would be, right? The duration of bias. How long does a person own something? Well, he owns it until he dies. You see? So that's the concept called duration. So the question when he dies, what transpires to his ownership, really? Is his ownership
expired.
transferred to his Yoshim? So what would minat Torah automatically?
That would
And
continue.
therefore, what would you say it's similar to?
Well, that's what the word Yerush means.
What was that?
That's what the word Yerush
Yeah,
means.
to inherit. But the
Inherit,
question
but
is,
it goes further.
okay, so that's the question. Are you inheriting his bias,
Or it's a new body formed.
or it's a
right
new
now.
bias form?
Saying, you were asking what does it look like if it's transferred? It's like a yabama, I guess.
Like who?
A yabama.
Yevama, I was thinking of mechira, sale. If I sell you something, what am I really doing?
You're transferring the ownership.
Am I transferring ownership to you, or am I removing my ownership and you're placing your ownership on it?
Oh, that's a same question.
Same question.
There's any lien on it.
You see what I'm saying?
Right.
No, it's really ownership, but I'm taking off the I and putting you. It's like changing the name on a document.
Right.
But it's still the same ownership. Or, no, guy dies, it's owner. But the Torah says that there's an automatic transference of that ownership to his Yoshim. So that's like Mechira. When a guy sells it, he's not transferring his ownership. He's Masalik. He removes his ownership, allowing you to put on your ownership. Except the Yoshim, it's mandated by the Torah automatically. Don't do anything. That's a Hakira. You see? And so on. But, so the generalization of get would be death. That there are other ways to sever the marriage bond. You see. Then if you want to generalize it further, you would say, well, what other ways are there to dissolve ownership? Not just ishus. Ownership in general.
Hefker.
Hefker. So we have gittin, hefker, what else?
Mechira.
Who?
Mechira.
Mechira, sale, exactly. What else is there?
Hekdesh.
Hektish, very good. You see? It's a whole bunch of ways. How about yush?
Matana. Oh, Yush.
Matana,
Matana Yush.
yush. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of ways. So what have I done? I've looked at get, I've seen more ways, and then I realized that a get is nothing more, it's part of the family of things which dissolve ownership. That's its family, right? That's a generalization. Got that? You really know something when you do this. You see something clearly. Remember, true understanding is what is something, what is it, and to what does it belong. That's its generalization, or its synthesis. Do that to everywhere in Shas. Okay? Now that we've done that, we go back to that second Mishnah, and all you need to read is one halacha in that second Mishnah. What was that halacha? The halacha was, let's say by the barber, mincha, let's assume it arrives. It arrives, right? Let's say it's mincha doila, 12:30, it's now 1 o'clock. I want to take a haircut. So the Mishnah says, no, you can't take a haircut unless you dab mincha first. Okay? Now, one of the ideas about this is, why not? Why can't I dab mincha? Why can't I take a haircut? And the answer to that is because, and that's called its rationale. What is the reason for the law, which is rabbinical?
Correct.
Is because the instrument of the barber may break, and you're going to wait until he fixes it, and until he fixes it, mincha will have passed. Therefore, don't start the business. Don't even start the activity of taking a haircut until you've done
There's a
mincha.
possible delay.
There's a possibility,
Possibility of delay.
right? Now, what are some of the important conditions? One, mincha is obviously, there's a deadline for this. So it has to involve an activity, a mitzvah, which has a deadline. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So one, it has to be a mitzvah. Doesn't have to, mincha is a mitzvah. We're generalizing now. It has to be a mitzvah that has a deadline to be performed. Yes?
So maybe a bezdin should also. You shouldn't be able to start a bet.
Very good. And that's exactly what it is. V'lo loden. You can't sit down. Exactly. You see? From the generalization, you're able to figure out a new halacha. Because what we're really creating is the formula. So if you have a mitzvah, 1, that has a deadline to be performed, 2, yes? Then, so the question is, can I engage in another activity and not worry about that I will miss the time of that first mitzvah? That is the question. And the answer is no. If the activity that you want to engage in, there may be some type of mishap where it will prevent you or you will forget, because you're so involved in the activity, right? The performance of that mitzvah, and you cannot begin, you cannot initiate that. Huh?
On air.
Okay, so what are we understanding? Right? We're understanding based on the reason, right, that a mitzvah that has a deadline for performance, or a time limit for performance, you cannot engage in an activity that is possible to get involved with, thereby forgetting about the mitzvah. And then the deadline will pass and you can't do it anymore. You know what I'm saying? So what have we done? We've gone from the halacha itself to a generality, a general statement. That it's not just mincha. See, here what the Mishnah did is it went through a whole bunch of activities, but those are all specifics. What I did is not just give you more activities, it's to create a generalization that no activity you can begin, initiate,
Right.
if it will create a possibility that a mitzvah that has a time limit may not be able to be performed. You won't perform it, you cannot involve yourself in that activity. You see that leap? Which is much greater. So the Mishnah generalized it or extended it. Didn't generalize it. It extended it to 4 other activities. Right? So we had haircut, barber, bathhouse, tanning. You cannot eat and you can't judge. So the Mishnah itself extended it to so there are 4 extensions, 5 halachas. But what we did is what? We didn't just extend other activities or list other activities. We created a general formula. See the difference? And that tells us, by extending the formula, we can now see the general rule that if you have a mitzvah that has a time period beyond of which you're not yotzei, then you cannot engage in an activity that may cause you to miss that time period because something may happen during the activity that will cause you to forget or become so involved, forget actually, mincha or any mitzvah, and not perform it. That is a formula for that Mishnah. You see what I just did? Are we finished?
I mean, the other cases are extension, as you said. I mean,
They're just extensions.
They're gonna explain. They're gonna basically explain.
Same thing, exact same.
Which
Each of
kind
these
of activity?
activities, which activities will cause you to something there may be a mishap and therefore you're going to miss
And what
mitzvah. Can we generalize it higher? Yeah.
So you say we take it high, even higher than that?
Yes. We can generalize it even higher.
Missing the mitzvahs? I mean,
Who?
missing the mitzvahs, chashivos of mitzvahs.
No. We can generalize even higher. And this would be the generalization even higher.
What could be higher? I mean, here we already, if
I'm
this
supposed
happens,
to do A.
you-
Wait.
Oh, okay.
I'm supposed to do A. That's a positive act. Yes? And A, now I'm no more going to talk about a mitzvah. I'm talking about an act. I'm supposed to do act A. Mincha. Let's call it Act A. But Act A has a time limit. You see, now this becomes a real formula. So let's do Act A, but Act A has a time period. Correct? Okay. But there's an Act B that I want to do. So the question is, what do I do? Do I do Act B and not worry about Act A going past? Or I can't do Act B because something may happen and that interferes or removes the possibility of doing Act A. I can't, right? Well, that's very interesting. See. So that's its higher idea. Forget about mincha. Forget about a mitzvah. Let's talk about, what about, can I do something, in other words,
B prevents A or B causes A.
oh,
That's
can I do something? So Act A is what I have to do. Act B may prevent the fulfillment of A,
Right.
so I can't do B. But wait a minute. What happens if there's A isn't an act that I have to do? What happens if Act A is I'm not allowed to do it? There's an Issa. Got it?
Time period is so.
So Act A is an Issa, not Chiyuv. It's not Mincha.
It's Shabbos.
Shabbos. Right? And I can't pull leaves out of, I can't pull a twig off the branch. But so the question is, what happens if there's an Act B that can cause me to do Act A?
So the same category.
Same kind of concept, wouldn't it?
Habitual.
Habitual antecedent. In other words, what happens if there's an Act B that will cause me to do Act A, but Act A isn't the mitzvah that has a time period, which I'll forget. That was the Issa. Here, I'll do that which I'm not allowed to do, which is Act. So Act A is an Issa. So therefore, can I engage in Act B, which is permitted, but Act B is somehow connected to Act A, right? And therefore, can I do Act B? And the answer is no.
So talking formally, B
See, the
causes
same concept. If you have an act that in some way will either prevent the fulfillment or create the desecration, either way, then you cannot do Act B. Even though Act B is permitted. I can take a haircut, no Issa B'Dava. Yeah, but you take a haircut, then you can't have mincha. You know? I can ride a horse. No, but if you ride a horse, in order to control the animal, you're going to snap off a branch and hit the horse. Can't do it. You see? So in other words, if you have an Act B which is connected to an Act A, and Act A is a mitzvah, a chiyuv, a chiyuv, or an issa, that's Act A, can you do Act B which is really mutter, but is somehow connected
Could be a
to Act A?
detractor.
What's its connection, you can ask. So in the case of mincha, intense involvement, I'll forget. By riding a horse, the involvement is
Habitual.
habit. By habit, I don't even think. I just snap it and I use it there at the horse. So that's called habitual connection. But in the end, if there's a connection between B and A, you can't do B because it'll lead to A. Whether A is a chiyuv or A is an issa, I cannot do B. Because B is connected to A either because the nature of A, right? The nature of B will allow you to forget the chiyuv, or the nature of B is connected habitually. How's that?
Talking about formula. Because
And that's
because
a
it's
beautiful generalization. Because now you're going to see all the Mishnahs. In fact, one of the classic cases is what? One of the classic cases is, can you take up food and put it on the stove 5 minutes before Shabbos
Right.
without a blech? My chon. I put it on the fire before Shabbos. Now that's Act B. Nothing wrong with that. As long as I put it on Shabbos, I can take a pot, right, and put it on the fire 5 minutes before blech benching. Why not? What's the problem here? So that's Act B, which is mutter. What's the problem? So it's connected to Act A. What's Act A? Because I'm going to come home at night after davening, And something that's on the stove 5 minutes before Shabbos is not cooked by the time I get up from shul. Unless I go to these minyonim that take 3 hours to do Ma'ariv. It's a different story. Maybe that's a heter. You know. But normally, you hold my, 3/4 of an hour? Right? By that time, chont isn't cooked, or whatever you got cooking there, right? So what's going to happen? I come home, take a look at my pot, and I'm coming home, and I'm hungry, starving. Yes? I take a look at the pot, and I say, hey, come on, it's not even half cooked. You see? So what am I going to do?
Stir the coals.
So I'll be so mindful that I want to eat, that I will forget it's Shabbos. I'll bend down and rake the coals in those days. Today it would be I'll turn the fire higher, you know, just to fuel source, you know, right? So that's awesome, that's havara, and it's also bishul. You've just made the fire higher, and you're also cooking it faster. You're over 2 malachas. That's act B. So then the question is there a connection? And the answer is yes. Act B, which is putting the food on a fire 5 minutes before Shabbos, is connected, right, to the fact of increasing the fuel and being over havor and bishul. It is connected. Chazal felt there's a connection. In other words, my desire to eat is so great, right, that I'll forget it's Shabbos and I'll just turn it on. So Chazal therefore said, don't put anything on the fire 5 minutes before. Sorry. You see? There you are. You see? Same concept. Well, if Act B, which is mutter, will somehow lead to A, and there's a connection here, right? Then you cannot do Act B, even though B is mutter, because it will lead to A.
Right.
You see? So the beauty of this Mishnah allows us to formulate an incredible principle. That one of the reasons why the rabbis, Chazal, Asad, prohibited, is connections of mutter to asa. You see? So that's its greatest generalization. So look what I did. The Mishnah expanded it, or expanded the halacha, bathhouse, judgment, eating, it expanded the activities. We generalized by saying it's a mitzvah that has a time limit, and you can't do Act B because it will cause you to forget A. After the time limit, yeah, eventually you remember mitzvah, it's too late. But that's a second. So we generalize it one step. But then we generalize it to a second step by saying what? That it's not only if it's a mitzvah to do, and this will prevent you from doing, but what happens if it causes you to do an Isa? You see? So if Act B prevents you from doing a mitzvah, or causes you to do an avera, because there's a connection between B and A, you can't do B. There you are. That generalization is going to be filled with the whole shot, the yummy gzeras, that's a gzera. But there's a gzera on you can't do B because it will lead to preventing A, or you can't do B because it will allow you to cause A and Issa. That's a gzera. You see? So we now understand the reason for gzeras. That the gzera has to be either a mitzvah or Issa. It has to be an act which is permitted, and that act in some way has to be connected to A. There you are.
What's interesting is that the type of gzera we have here is a gzera that you may forget.
You may forget to perform.
You may forget to perform, or you may forget and perform the wrong.
So that's the concept. It'll prevent you from doing the mitzvah.
Right. To omit or commit, right?
And that I use the word very good. So therefore, you're not allowed to do Act B if it will cause you to omit something, mincha,
Right.
or you're not allowed to do Act B if it causes you to commit, an Isa. So if Act B is or causes you to omit or commit a mitzvah or avera, you can't do Act B. That's it. It's the concept of omission or commission of a mitzvah, if it's tied to that. There you are. It's the whole gzera. You see? But look at the steps I just did.
And it has good part of Masechet Shabbos.
Sure, Yom Gzera is still on Shabbos, and they're all under this. I mean, not all, but a lot of them are under this. The whole bishul, shiur, putting something 5 minutes before, that's an avera of commission, not omission.
So I'm saying the reason why we're trying to generalize that is because for the Mishnah is going to bring, we're going to try to see what kind of gzera, meaning we're going to try to define exactly in what aspects, when do Chachamim make a gzera, or when they don't make a gzera.
Yeah, exactly.
What I'm trying to think, what I was trying to say before is that
Remember, the magic word is connection. They have to decide, is B connected to A?
right. We have to try to define connections
Yeah.
from all the.
And we go on their decision, not us, because they're the one who made xeris.
Well, there's categories of connections. Some things are connections, some things not.
Exactly. Some things are habitually connected.
Right.
Something they're not habitually connected.
There's resemblance also.
That's another xer. But something are connected probability-wise. Statistics. That if you do act B, statistically it's going to lead to A. Not because of habitual antecedent. I mean, you have to get examples for that. What?
Not because of habit.
No.
Well, what's an example? Just one example.
I don't know, I have to think. But right now, habitual...
Who? Do you have to stop on that?
Well, that's another
Non-mission.
component. No, so that's part of the yigzer, you know.
Probability, right?
What happens if, what happens, you want to take a haircut before mincha, but what happens if he sat down to the barber? Does he have to go walk out and down mincha? Those are all components of this gzera,
Right.
which I left out. It's part of the components of the gzera. See, very important that you can learn any halacha with tremendous depth. You know, first, what is a halacha? Case, conduct. You know what I'm saying? There's always a situation, and then there's always a required behavior. Then you look at the case itself and say, okay, how do I divide the case into its parts? And what is the conduct in each part? See, until now we just looked at the halacha in general. Right now we understand that each part has a halacha. You know, like I showed you by get. Who can divorce his wife? When? How? What's? And so on. You know? So that's the first idea, which is very important. Then what we see is the concept of halacha, that we want to understand what is the halacha, case conduct, right? We want to be able to look at its components, again, case, conduct, and so on. And then we want to take a look and generalize it. But generalization can go up. It's not just one idea. You know, there's an immediate generalization. Well, many activities, like mincha, you can't do many things before mincha. That was an expansion of the original halacha. But then we wanted more than just an expansion. We wanted generalization. So when we said that B omits mincha. And then we say, it's not just omits mincha, it's also can commit an avera. So that we realize is the major idea between many xeris of Shabbos. And that leads us right into the third Mishnah.
May I just say, I asked something.
Yeah, sure.
This category of gezeros, the gezerah was that I may forget mincha. So
I may forget mincha.
I may forget that mincha, right? So it's a gezerah where I'm going to be honest, basically. Meaning if I forget that mincha, I'm honest, right?
Well, you're already looking at you were over.
Right. Meaning that
So what are the consequences of your avera?
No, what I'm trying to ask is as follows. You can make a gzera because I make a gzera, mean don't do B or don't do A, because if you do A, you're going to forget to do B.
If you do B,
you're going to forget to do A.
Yeah.
That's one type of gzera. There's another type of gzera that, and I'm not sure that's what if that what Mishnah intends over here is don't do B, because if you do B, you're going to
do A. Or
no. A is just going to become too difficult for you not to do. Meaning, imagine A is an Isser.
A is an Isser, not
right.
A.
So I could say don't read in front of an air.
Yeah.
Which is going to come up.
Yeah.
Don't read because of an air. Why? Because you Shema Yate. So Shema Yate, is it because you're going to forget that it's Shabbos, or it's forgetting that it's also you're going to do it habitually. That's one kind of gzera that you could do. You could say. Another type of gzera we know, because now if you're reading, meaning you know it's Shabbos, you know it's Asr, but it's too hard. Meaning you're bringing up the challenge of not turning the lights
More
higher. You're making it harder for you, and you may fall now.
I don't know what you mean by harder.
For example, lo yeshev hazovim hazavo, meaning is it the problem that you're eating? You're putting yourself in a too hard of a situation. Not that you're going to forget it. It's also
No,
you're still going to know in the back of your
Why
mind.
is it in the sign? Because of the habitual connection.
I agree. I just want to know, is it the type of gzera where we say that you're going to omit or commit because you forget, or you're going to omit or commit because it's too hard
I forget.
not to do it or to do it?
It's not too hard. There's no time into reading, and you're gonna,
You are reading, and you can't see now.
It's not such a time.
No, I don't think you're right. It's too hard. The question is, what's the probability that if you read, right, that you're gonna you're gonna incline the lamp?
Right.
What's the probability? That's the question. It's not about hard or the question is probability. The question is hard or not.
Meaning we don't know if we don't care if it's because you're going to forget, or if it's because it's going to be too hard for you, or whatever it is. We want to know what's the probability at the end of the day.
We do want to know why the probability is so high.
Right.
And the answer is what? The next Mishnah. If you're reading, there's a very high probability that you will incline the oil dish to bring more oil to the wick, and the fire will get brighter so you can read better. It's a high probability. Why?
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 Because of the habitual antecedents.
What's the habit?
The habit is
What's the habit?
when I read, I want good lighting. So if I'm reading and I see the lighting is not good enough, I'm just going to make the lighting better.
No, the habit is that's what you do every
the
day.
habit.
That's
No.
what you do every day.
I walk in the
But you
dark
know it's
room,
Shabbos.
turn on the lights.
Because
No,
you're
but
not
you know
gonna
it's
be
Shabbos,
thinking,
so
that's
what?
why.
What?
You're not going to be thinking.
Why?
You forget it's
It
Shabbos.
should be a ranga time.
Oh, that's why. Exactly. Each connection is different. You see, when you're riding a horse, so Chazal say, don't ride horses. Eyes act B, because it can lead to act A, which break the twig. Why? Why would I do that? I know, I mean, we're not talking about a guy who knows it's mut, who thinks it's mutter. We're not talking about a shoygeg, a guy that I didn't know it was asa. Obviously not. We're talking about a guy who knows it's also to break a branch, because that's koitza, and so on and so forth. Yet he's going to do it anyway. Question is why? You know what I'm saying? What's the connection? And the answer is, because what is a habit? A habit is an activity done without thinking. It's automatic. You walk into the bathroom,
Turn on the lights.
you don't think. You don't even think, you stop and say, did I turn on the lights or not? Those are called automatic activities.
Right.
Now, so therefore Chazal said, it's automatic. You grab a twig. You know it's asa, but the act is done beyond human consciousness.
So it's not
Wait.
an avera then. If it's really a gzera automatic, then you didn't do anything. Why are Chachamim so concerned about
You
doing
put yourself
this?
inside your state.
No, so what? But what you did is nothing. You don't even have to bring a common shogeg. Nothing.
Yeah,
No.
but
Of course you have to.
what you are saying,
It's not
It was
Misasek.
automatic.
No, it's not Misasek. There's difference between Misasek and Shoyge.
No, but that's exactly what I'm asking you.
it's a
What I'm asking
misase.
you here.
and
If
you
it's a
don't call it
misase,
exactly.
if it's a misase,
So that's a very good
what's the
question.
whole gzera about?
But that's a good question.
That's
Why
what I
will
wanna
a
say.
guy?
It's not misasek. I want to say that.
Well, it's
more
not
of a
because it's
shogeg type.
asa. Yeah, exactly.
He
So you
knows.
have to look. What does shoygeg mean? That there's a negligence involved. Masasik is there's no
You
negligence.
put yourself in a situation that you will be
Now,
Misasek.
he's saying that misasek, when you had a choice not to get into that situation to begin with, is not a misasek anymore. But this is a major chiddush. He's saying Gabi Korban, like
Okay,
Yeah, very
reading from a candle. Reading from candle, right? What's the connection? I can't read because I'm going to incline the lamp. Why? What will cause you to do it? What makes it highly probable that you will incline?
automatic.
No,
Oh, the fact that I'm involved.
because the mind cannot engage in two things at the same time. You are so involved in reading, you are into the reading,
Right.
and therefore you forgot it's Shabbos.
Right.
You know, you ever wake, you know, sometimes you wake up in the morning, you know, you're saying, oh, it's Shabbos, you know, like, because you were out, you know. Same thing, you can get so involved
After
with
12
reading.
hours.
What?
After 12 hours, you forget.
Yeah, you guys ever wake up in the morning and all of a sudden you had to remember what Shabbos? You know? But that's why. So what causes you to forget it's Shabbos, right,
Involvement.
is because you're involved in another activity, reading, and that takes all your consciousness and awareness. You're intently involved in reading. Because of that, you know, the memory that it's Shabbos is lapses, and then automatically you don't have any light, you just incline. What would have prevented you from inclining that is to remember what Shabbos. But once you don't remember it, because you're so in the reading, it's exactly that's the habitual connection. But what allows you to do the habitual connection is the intensity of the activity of reading. You see what I'm saying? Maybe that's the same thing with riding. You're riding a horse. Riding a horse is not something, once you're a pro, you know, once you're a cowboy, I'm doing it for years, you know. Guy's riding a horse, you need to control the animal. You know what I'm saying? So, so your focus and concentration, right, is not to fall off the horse. You know what I'm saying? It's to make sure you stay on that horse, you know, and the horse is galloping or whatever, and your focus is to stay on the horse. Once your focus intently is on an activity, then immediately you forget it's Shabbos. You know what I'm saying? You forget it's Shabbos, you snap so now the habit takes over where you snap the twig. Just like, you know, once you forgot it's Shabbos, you incline the lamp. Because the inclination is going to come. That's the habit. There's a habitual connection between the two. The question is, can you be saved because you knew it was Shabbos?
Maybe.
Now the question is, what is the probability or the certainty? So psik ratio simply means if you do act A, right, and you intend to do act A, and you know act A and so on, if act B is certainly going to occur, that's called the psik ratio. Psik ratio is the relationship of certainty.
So what's probability is uncertainty?
There is no probability. It's vadai. So then the only thing that will save you is the nichole and no. Do I want B to happen or not? And so on. Psik ratio is not a statement.
It's a vada.
It's a vada of the connection between two outcomes. If you do outcome A, outcome B will happen.
Here we're not sure. There's a probability.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah, it's a probability. We don't know.
B gonna,
90-10.
Yeah, it was a guy's riding a horse. Not everybody rides a horse going to snap the twig.
Right.
You see? But since there's a high probability, so in that sense, you know. So probably that's the answer for riding the horse. Is the activity of riding a horse takes a tremendous amount of concentration because you don't want to fall off the horse. That means that you're going to forget. You forget because the mind can only do one thing at a time. And therefore, once you forgot it Shabbos, habit takes over, snap. You see? The trick, the problem, or the thing over there by these guys is that they forgot it Shabbos. That would have saved them. So in the absence of the ideal at Shabbos, the habit took over. So it needs two things.
And since
it needs a habit, and it needs the second thing, which is what? Which is the forgetting Shabbos. So it's two dinim you need to qualify for that gzera.
If you have a shomer, it's a whole different ballgame. I mean, you could be.
Who?
If you have somebody that you're, let's say by reading, if you have your rov, someone you have a moira from.
Yeah, because then you'll never forget.
Then you don't forget.
You know why?
Keep it in mind.
Well, because you're
embarrassed,
embarrassed or afraid he's going to pot you, depending if you're a kid or not. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Can't you say
That you'll never forget it's Shabbos. So therefore, even though you have a habit, so you need two things in order to have the gzera. You need the habitual antecedent connection, and you need the possibility, a very strong possibility or probability that you will forget it's Shabbos. Then you have the gzera, that you have these things, all of these things. You see what I'm
Can't you
saying?
say now that habit is more?
Well, habit is
more,
what.
so the more overpowers the.
Habit is
You
what.
are habit.
Habit. Look, the
The
two things.
and the mitzias of the
It's
person
habit.
is
Yeah.
habit.
Yeah.
So you're mostly habit. So the
Well, you need
the
the-
little part
That will
that
stop
Shabbos,
you. Will stop you.
Stop
from,
you.
Yeah. That's what does it.
see, it switches all automatic to habit.
But in the absence of that yediyah, you're going to do it. That's the habit. So you need both. That's what comes out of all this is the generalization clarifies this beautifully, what's going on here. That all these, what's called habitual antecedent, that's Act B will always antecedes habitually, but it's intense enough to forget Shabbos. We now understand Gzera beautifully. We can take a look at every single Gzera on that principle, and you'll always see. I think so, as far as I know, there's a habitual antecedent, and the activity is intense enough where you forget Shabbos.
We could call it maybe a habitual deterrent.
No, it has to be habitually. This B will always antecede, precede the A. Yeah, and therefore there's all these we'll see. All the rest of the Mishnahs is just this. Like we said.
Well, no, so then you're going to have Kayetze Bazelo Yeshav Hazavim Hazava, which is also an habitual in this antecedent, but it's not forgetting anymore. Now it's more like raising the challenge to levels where you can't
the drive.
Control yourself, right?
The drive, exactly, yeah.
It's not even habitual, it's something else. It's entirely.
It's also habitual, no? It says Kayetze Bazeh, I mean, is that the same kind of gzera, like of habitual? Meaning, if you do B, if you start eating with a zava, you may end up.
Well, it is. It's not habit in the sense that it's not beyond consciousness. It's conscious, except the drive.
It's not a habit. It's a drive.
It's not a habit. It's a drive.
It's a force.
It's a drive.
It's a force.
It's a drive. It's a different type.
It's also antecedent.
It's a different antecedent. It's a different antecedent connection. It's a drive. Incredible urge.
Right.
It's also in spite of consciousness.
Yeah. So the idea apparently is not sufficient. So the Chazal, I'm not looking at the idea because the guy knows it's also. The Chazal realized that the drive, it's like, ain't apitropis larayas. Chazal.
Right.
Yeah, guys with a girl, and then you have some other guy in the room, he's the apitropis. No, there's nothing apitropis. The drive will overcome both.
Right.
Same thing, Chazal recognize that there's certain urges and drives that you may overcome it, but the probabilities, it's always a probability. The probability is very high that you will not be able to overcome.
I mean, it doesn't even have to be too high.
What?
It doesn't even have to be too high. I mean, although it's not too, it doesn't have to be too high. Chazal make gzeres with low probabilities also.
I don't know. You have to take a look. But it's either because the urge is so great you won't be able to stop the urge even though you have the idea.
Right.
Or the urge is an urge, but what really kills you is you forgot a Shabbos. So what we're doing now is doing what? You can take a look at each gzera, and you now can see its fundamental principles. What's going on here, and so on. And this is all from one mission. We didn't do the other missions. I mean, we brought the other mission as an example. But look how much you can think about once you allow yourself to think. Look how far you can go. See? People do not realize the power of the mind if they think correctly. They don't realize you can understand, you know how to define, you can break it down to its components, and you can see its principles, you can generalize, you do all this without any mafalshim, really. The beauty is when you do it, and then you see mafalshim, you say, I see, that machlokes is really in that part. It's part, whatever the part is. And that machlokes is in something else. Or the Rambam could say, in this halacha, also, and then he could say mutter, and you think, normally you'd say, well, the Rambam is talking about this halacha, so I could be also mutter. And the answer is no. He's talking about part 1 of it, and the other halacha of the Rambam is talking about part 4. See? That's how you answer so many questions. You know what I'm saying?
That's the brisker word of the Mishnah. Sishpalza? That's what
You
they
could
say?
use that word, yeah. This is the brisker derek, you should know. That's really what it is. Don't ask a
to
brisker,
analyze, to
because
bring.
most briskers will not know what to say. They don't know the definition. They do it intuitively. That's why it takes years. If they would know what they're doing, if they would formulate, articulate clearly this type of formula, everybody would be a brisker in half a year. Everybody. That's the only way to do it. You have to know what you're doing. And therefore you can apply this knowledge to anything. But if you don't know what you're doing, then the only way to learn is by examples. It takes years till you figure out intuitively what's going on. Because you really learn by examples. You see, that brisk should not be taught that way. It should be taught what we're doing here. See, you take a case, you define it.
That's not the
You
same.
divide it into its components, and then you got all its parts.
That's not the
Then
same.
all the Meforshim deal with those parts. That's all. You know? And then you generalize. And that synthesis, that organizes it, and from that itself you have different levels of generalization until you finally come to the general formula that Chazal use. And then you match it up. It's okay. It's a theory. What do we do when you have a theory? Subject it to tests. Well, you can't experiment on it, right? So the only thing you do is subject it to halachas. So you can actually go through the Xeris of Chazal, and in each one you determine what is the criteria that they use. And after a while, you can predict. You can predict what they're going to do, and
Well,
so on.
that's the point of a pesach.
That's the point, because he's got to be he's got to be able to apply all this information to something new. Exactly. I say, well, I can see there's a high probability because it's habit, and you can certainly forget it's Shabbos, so can't do it. That's the only way to be a pesach, really. Or else you can't be maven tova mitech tova. You cannot. You need to be able to apply from A. It's called to extrapolate. To extrapolate this halacha into another halacha by knowing its principles. You see? So if you find a halacha and you come out with its principle, and you find another case that has the same principle, there you are. Same halacha, same din. You see?
Every conduct has principles.
Every halacha has a reason called its principle.
Halacha for the conduct. For the conduct.
For the conduct. Yeah. Why is this the definition of a principle in this case, you know, an idea or concept that determines the idea that governs the rationale of a halacha is called its principle. How does that sound? The idea that governs, rules, right? The idea that governs, right, or determines the din of the halacha, which is the conduct to a case, is called the principle, or the rationale, or the reason, or the tam. It's all the same word. Tam, reason, rationale, I don't know what you call it. But that is the most important explanatory statement in a halacha. Without that, all you know is case and conduct. You don't know why. It's the why. Without the why, you have no explanation. So after the case and conduct, the most important idea is its principle, because that's the whys. And once you have that, then you understand the halacha.
So the principle is the generalization always?
It could be.
Or it could be
'Cause then
generalized.
It could be. Now, once you have the principle, then you could generalize wherever else this principle is found, which is what we did. The principle of this halacha was what? B will lead to A.
Leads to A.
You see, that was the principle. So the Mishnah does it by just including more activities. We did it by saying, wait a minute. We generalize it into the concept of Act B will cause you to omit A. But then we realized, commit too. It'll cause you to commit an Isa. So because of that principle, where B will have an effect on A, which is connected to Torah, right? So we said, well, if you omit something, it's connected to Torah. And if you commit something, it's connected to it. So by understanding the principle of mincha, we were able to generalize it to all the xeris of Isa. See? So that's what we did. We generalized, which is taking the principle of this halacha and applying it much higher to all the halachas that Chazal made, not all the xeris that are based on the connection.
Antecedents.
Antecedents, yeah. And we did it without any mafashim. That's the power of thinking. It's unfortunate. We live in a generation that does not rely on their mind. They rely on information. They rely on mafashim. Mafashim are great when they are answers, but they should not be there to teach you how to think. If you know how to think correctly, you should be able to bavorn, which is anticipate, tremendous amount of mafashim's questions. You may not have the answer, because you may be lacking the idea to answer, so the Pirish has to do it. But I once made a statement which is very important. If you know what to look for because you have all the parts and the questions and so on, you've done all the analysis, and when you see a Pirish, you say, aha, he is answering my question. So you chanced upon the Pirish, but you understood what the Pirish is telling you. Whereas another guy just goes right over the Pirish. He doesn't even understand what the Pirish is really trying to answer. Whereas you did, because you did your homework. I once gave you the statement. Chance favors the prepared mind. I chanced upon the Pirish, but because I was prepared, it favors me. It tells me what's going on. Whereas if you don't do that, hey, all you know is so-and-so said something, but you don't know what he's addressing. What bothered him? You see. And so on. Okay.
Great.
This was a very important shiur. Very. It's the key to thinking. And you now know what the brisker derech is. So, all you guys can learn brisk now. Isn't it interesting? Be able to understand what a derech really is, how to do it. What was that?
About a brisker chabura.
I always find that fascinating. You know. But it's really very interesting.
To me, over and over.
You know why?
Non-stop. Because you
It's
we're
your whole
lazy.
life you're not that way.
What was the word we
Lazy.
used that says your situation?
Habit.
Habit.
It's crazy.
You have formed bad habits.
Bad habits. You know my like
Because you're already almost 30 and you didn't.
almost, yeah.
In
In fact,
almost
if you want to use the formula,
And your brain is already going slow.
30.
Like 35.
It's 25.
Okay.
next Gilgal will make it to 30. This Gilgal it's over with. You know.
Yeah.
Well, that's what you've been. I'll tell you, there's several things. It's not only the fact that you've been thinking sloppy your whole life.
You're not thinking.
But you're not thinking. But what's even more is that you don't even know there's another way to think.
Right.
Even if you wanted to change, I don't know. I didn't even know there was another way, let alone know how to do it, because you've grown that this is the expectancy. Because everybody learns this way, everybody thinks this way. So there's no other way. It's more, you know. So it's not only that you've habituated yourself to think this way. You don't know of any other way. So now what do you have to overcome? You need to overcome several obstacles. One, you now become aware that there is another way. You have to be convinced there's another way. And you now, right? Be
That's the
convinced.
hardest part.
Right? No, that's not the hardest part. No. You come a couple of times to this and you're convinced.
Oh.
You know what the real hard part is? To do it. Your brain doesn't want to move. It's called inertia. Remember
Yes.
Newton? No, the first law of motion? Inertia. An object at rest will tend to stay at rest, and an object in motion will tend to continue in motion unless acted upon by an external force. The mind, what inertia simply means whatever state you're in, you're going to stay that
That's
way.
that way, right.
You're not going to move. Biologically, it's called homeostasis. The body always wants to maintain its state. Even if the guy asks you, well, what do you think? That's not the only thing you do. You didn't teach the guy how to think. You know, imagine a guy goes to medical school, you know, and, you know, he has the information, and they take him around what's called clinical rounds. You know, they take a look at people, the beds and all that, right? And then the supervising guy says, okay, what do you guys think, you know? I don't know. You have to know how to think medically. You have to know how to diagnose. Okay, what should I look for? There's a whole method. There's a checklist. You know, I can have all the information in the world, you know, but if I don't have a checklist, I don't know what to do. You see, everything has a checklist. Thinking has a checklist. When you get to a halacha, what am I supposed to think about? So when you tell the student, well, what do you think? You know what I think. You tell me what I'm supposed to think. I don't know what to think about. You need to teach me a method, a derech. Nobody teaches drachim. That's the mistake everybody makes. They think they'll get away with it by trying to coax you to think. No, you need to learn how to think. And that's what we do here. Definition, components, generalization. Conduct. You know, you say on the mashal. What about the mashal? Right? Not only that, you know, how did the mashal figure this out? You need to independent. So Mashal had a method. He had a derech. So you need to understand, well, what did he do? You see what I'm saying? Well, the Mashal realized something. A lot of people don't realize. In any given sugya, Shaka V'Tanya, there are two things going on. There's the debate itself, the logic of the debate. Is his question good? Does the answer make sense? Well, what is the real refutation? Is it a real refutation? Why couldn't it refute it another way? See, that's the logic of the debate. That's the analysis of the debate itself. But then, what are they debating about? An idea. Well, how does the idea change in the debate? You see, so there are two things going on in the sugya. There's the mechanics. That's the mashal. But then there's the concepts. That's brisk. In a certain way. You see? Most people don't realize that. You know, there are many mefoshim that are mechanical. I don't mean mechanical in the sense of mechanical, but they deal with the mechanics. They deal with the argument itself. You know? And then there are mefoshim that deal more with the havana in the sense of, well, what's happening to the halacha, the idea itself? You know? Best thing is to combine them both. You know?
Of course.
You know? Anyway.